The first time I noticed something was wrong, I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining things, that my mind was being overly cautious. But that Thursday evening, as I walked past the living room, my gut twisted in a way it hadn't before. My husband, Mark, was hugging Jenna, the babysitter. It wasn't the casual, "Oh, thank you for picking up the baby's toys" kind of hug. No, this was a lingering, intimate embrace, the kind that makes your stomach knot and your chest tighten all at once. I froze. For a moment, I thought about calling out, asking if everything was okay. But something inside me whispered, "Don't rush. Watch first." My eyes narrowed as I pretended to be busy straightening the magazines on the coffee table. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just watched. Mark pulled away and laughed at something Jenna said. But it wasn't the laugh I knew. There was an unfamiliar softness in his voice, a tone I had only ever heard directed at me in the early months of our marriage, before comfort and routine had dulled it. Jenna smiled back, and the way her fingers lingered against his shoulder made my heart sink. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it's innocent. Maybe it's nothing. But deep down, I knew that the sinking feeling in my chest wasn't going away. I went to the kitchen and pretended to busy myself with dinner. My hands shook slightly as I chopped vegetables. The sound of the knife hitting the cutting board echoed too loudly in the silence of the house. Mark and Jenna's voices floated to me from the living room, too faint to make out words, but loud enough to remind me that what I had seen had happened. It wasn't the first Thursday I'd noticed. I hadn't said anything because I didn't want to seem paranoid, but Thursdays had a pattern. Jenna arrived promptly at 5:30 p.m., stayed late, and always lingered just a little too long after the baby had gone to sleep. At first, I assumed she was just meticulous. She liked to make sure the house was tidy before leaving. But lately, I had noticed the way Mark's schedule seemed to bend around her visits. He'd have to work late on Wednesdays, then suddenly be free and unusually cheerful on Thursdays. And every time, Jenna seemed to be everywhere he was, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm when she thought I wasn't looking. That night, I decided I needed evidence. I wasn't going to confront them blindly. I wasn't going to let my imagination spiral into paranoia and ruin our marriage, or whatever was left of it, without proof. The baby monitor had been sitting in the drawer for months. I had resisted using it. I didn't like the idea of constantly watching our child on a screen, worried that I would see something I didn't want to see. But that night, I pulled it out and set it on the counter. The screen flickered to life, showing the nursery in soft, grainy black and white. My baby was asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing just a few rooms away. I thought about the hug, the way Mark had held Jenna. I had tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was upset, and he was comforting her. But the way she looked at him, the way he didn't even notice I was there, it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like betrayal. I sat in the living room, pretending to read a book while glancing at the nursery monitor. Each laugh, each soft word from the other room, made my stomach churn. I realized I had been ignoring the signs for months. The lingering touches, the subtle compliments, the shared jokes. I had been so wrapped up in daily life that I didn't want to see the truth. But denial can only last so long. Eventually, the mind notices patterns, and Thursday had become the day that my instincts refused to ignore. Mark entered the kitchen, smiling at me like nothing had happened. "Dinner smells amazing," he said. And for a second, I almost laughed, almost believed that maybe I was crazy. But then I looked into his eyes and caught that flicker, the one I had noticed before, of guilt or maybe fear. He quickly masked it with his usual charm, but it was there. I nodded, said thank you, and tried to focus on the vegetables. I told myself to relax, to breathe, to wait. Patience was my weapon. If I reacted too soon, I would lose control, and I needed control more than anything. After the baby had gone to sleep, Jenna didn't leave right away. She lingered, moving around the living room as if she were tidying up, or maybe just waiting for a private moment. My heart pounded. I wanted to storm in, demand an explanation, scream at both of them. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I retreated to the nursery, hiding the monitor in the closet, but keeping the feed open. My phone was in my hand, recording. I told myself it was overkill, that maybe it would be nothing. But part of me knew I couldn't afford to trust just my memory or my instincts. I needed proof, undeniable proof. As I watched, my blood ran cold. Jenna moved closer to Mark, brushing something off his jacket. She laughed softly, and he leaned in too close. My hand tightened around the phone. I could feel the rise of something I hadn't felt in a long time, cold, precise clarity. I realized then that my suspicion wasn't paranoia. It was intuition. And intuition had never failed me. The night wore on. Jenna finally left, pretending to be polite, laughing lightly, waving at the baby as she went. Mark kissed my forehead as I stood in the hallway, pretending to sleep. His lips lingered just a little too long. I swallowed the bile in my throat and forced myself to smile. Once the door clicked shut, I went straight to the nursery. I turned on the monitor, rewound the small recording I had captured earlier that evening, and watched it again. My stomach twisted into knots. There was no doubt. The hug had been deliberate. Jenna's hands, the way she leaned into him, the smiles exchanged. It was intimate, too intimate to be innocent. I sank into the rocking chair, my baby's soft breathing a reminder of what was at stake. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I thought. I planned. Every instinct in my body screamed that I had to be careful. Mark had no idea I had seen anything. And if I wanted the truth, if I wanted the betrayal exposed, I had to wait for the right moment. I realized something else that night. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, hidden behind laughter and casual touches, and sometimes it's the smallest gestures. The way someone's hand lingers, the way a hug lasts just a second too long. And the hardest part, it can happen right under your nose, in your own home, while you're caring for the person you love and trusting the people you believe are there to help. That Thursday, my world shifted. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine. But I also knew that rushing in would ruin everything. I needed a plan. I needed the whole story. I needed proof. And above all, I needed control. Control over the truth, over my emotions, and over what would happen next. Thursday became my turning point. It was the day I stopped ignoring my instincts. The day I started observing, analyzing, and planning. And most importantly, the day I decided I would not be a victim of betrayal. Not tonight, not ever. As I held my baby in my arms, feeling the warmth and innocence that had nothing to do with the chaos in the next room, I whispered to myself, I'll know the truth. And when I do, no one will be able to deny it. That night, I fell asleep holding the monitor close, the screen still glowing faintly, capturing every movement in the nursery. I knew that what I had started would change everything. And as my eyelids grew heavy, I felt a mix of fear, anger, and determination. Thursday was just the beginning. Thursday night had left me restless, my thoughts racing even as my body craved sleep. I held the baby monitor close, staring at the faint, flickering black and white image of our nursery. My daughter slept soundly, completely unaware that the world outside her crib had shifted, that the people she loved were no longer entirely trustworthy. I couldn't shake the memory of that hug, the way Mark had held Jenna, the lingering touch of her hand on his arm. The image replayed in my mind over and over, like a broken record I couldn't stop. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm. But deep down, I knew calmness would get me nowhere. I needed to know the truth. I decided that night that I would take a step I had resisted for months. I would install cameras in the nursery. Not just the monitor we already had, but hidden cameras that would record everything, capturing any moment Mark or Jenna tried to cross a line. I told myself it wasn't about spying. It was about protecting my daughter. But even as I said it, I knew part of me was driven by fear, by anger, by the need to confront betrayal before it could grow into something I couldn't undo. The next evening, I went out and bought small, inconspicuous cameras. They were tiny, barely noticeable, easy to place. I returned home, heart pounding, and set them up around the room. One behind the stuffed animals on the shelf, another near the ceiling corner, angled toward the crib, and the third hidden inside a photo frame on the dresser. I connected them all to my phone and laptop, giving me access to multiple angles. I waited until Mark left for his Thursday night meeting with Jenna. It had become routine. He always claimed work, always something urgent that made him unavailable. I knew by now it was a lie. I sat in the living room, my laptop open, and watched the live feed from the nursery. Minutes stretched into hours. I kept my breathing slow, my hands gripping the laptop as if my grip could somehow transmit my vigilance through the screen. Then, just after 8 p.m., the door clicked. My heart skipped. It was Jenna. She came in quietly, tiptoeing like she expected the house to be empty. She glanced around, oblivious to the cameras I had placed with such precision. I could see every movement on the screen. She went straight to the living room, pretending to adjust something on the table. Then Mark appeared, walking in from the hallway. My chest tightened instantly. My worst fears were about to be confirmed, or maybe shattered. Mark greeted her casually, smiling in a way he had learned to hide from me. But on the screen, there was no hiding it. There was the same warmth, the same softness in his eyes I had seen before. And then it happened. He reached out to hug her. I leaned forward, unable to tear my eyes away. The hug was longer this time. Jenna pressed herself against him, her hand lingering on his back. And then the unthinkable. Mark's hands moved to her waist, brushing against the fabric of her blouse. My fingers tightened around the edge of the laptop, nails digging into my palms. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a friendly gesture. It was deliberate, intimate, and completely inappropriate. I could feel my chest constricting, my mind racing. I wanted to scream, to rush in and stop it, but I knew better. I had cameras. I had evidence. And if I acted now, I would lose everything. I watched them for what felt like an eternity. Every laugh, every brush of hands, every soft whisper was captured. I could see the subtle glances, the way they leaned toward each other, the unspoken familiarity that made my stomach twist. My anger was a slow burn, turning into something colder, sharper. I realized then that the betrayal wasn't just physical. It was emotional, the kind that corrodes trust, that poisons love slowly until it's unrecognizable. As I watched, I noticed something else, something I hadn't expected. Jenna wasn't just lingering for attention. She was waiting for something calculated. She moved toward the hallway that led to the bedroom. Mark followed. I froze, holding my breath. My mind screamed at me to stop it, to intervene, but I stayed put. The cameras were recording everything. Through the grainy black and white feed, I saw them disappear from the living room. The hallway light flickered. Then, a sound that made my heart drop, a low, hushed laugh, almost a whisper. My baby stirred in her crib. I leaned closer, straining to hear. They were speaking softly, words I couldn't make out, but the intimacy in their tone was undeniable. I realized then that the baby monitor had been too small, too limited. It hadn't captured the full picture. These cameras, my little hidden eyes, were revealing the truth I had feared. Every gesture, every glance, every touch was documented. And the more I watched, the more I understood just how deep the betrayal went. Minutes later, they returned to the living room. Jenna straightened her blouse, pretending nothing had happened. Mark smiled, laughed at something she said, and the pretense of normalcy settled over the room like a heavy, suffocating blanket. I felt bile rise in my throat. They had no idea I had seen it all. And that realization made me shiver. Not with fear, but with a strange, powerful clarity. I paused the recording and rewound it, watching frame by frame. Every second confirmed what I had feared. The hug, the whispers, the subtle touches. It was all there. I took screenshots, saved the video to multiple devices, making sure I had every angle. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. This wasn't just evidence. It was armor, a shield I could use when the time came. As I sat there, holding the laptop on my lap, I thought about how long this might have been going on. How many Thursdays had passed unnoticed, disguised as ordinary babysitting visits. How many small gestures, unnoticed by me, had been building a secret world between them. And then, a chilling thought. What if this had been happening when I was in the next room, thinking everything was fine? I realized something else, a fear I hadn't expected. This wasn't just about Mark. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about safety. If the babysitter, the person I had trusted to care for my child, could cross boundaries with her father, what else was she capable of? The thought made my blood run cold. I had been blind, and I had almost trusted her completely. I spent the rest of the night watching, documenting, and analyzing. Every gesture, every laugh, every whispered word was noted in my mind. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The images on the monitor burned into my mind like fire. And yet, amidst the anger, the fear, the heartbreak, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I knew the truth now. I had seen it. I had proof. And with proof came control. The kind I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. By morning, I had downloaded the footage to a secure drive, hidden it in a locked drawer, and deleted all temporary files. I knew Mark and Jenna would never suspect a thing. They believed the baby monitor was just a simple device, nothing more. but I had turned it into my eyes, my witness, my silent ally. That Thursday, what had started as suspicion became certainty. The baby monitor had revealed what my heart had already known, and the hidden cameras had confirmed it. Betrayal wasn't a rumor anymore. It was reality, and I realized that reality was now mine to control. I held my baby close, rocking her gently as the sun rose. She yawned, stretched her tiny arms, and smiled at me in that innocent, unknowing way that made my heart ache. I whispered to her, "I've got you. I'll protect you." And I meant it. But I also whispered something else, a quiet vow that only I could hear. "And I'll make them pay for what they've done." Thursday had changed everything. It had taken suspicion and transformed it into knowledge, knowledge into strategy, and strategy into determination. I didn't know yet how I would confront Mark, how I would expose Jenna, or how I would reclaim control of my home and my life. But I knew this. I was no longer blind. I was awake, and nothing, not Mark, not Jenna, would get past me again. The baby monitor had shown me the first layer of deception. The hidden cameras had revealed the second. And I knew deep down that the days ahead would expose even more. Thursday wasn't just a day of suspicion anymore. It was the day I realized that betrayal had a face, and I was staring right at it. I didn't sleep that night. The footage from the hidden cameras played in my mind on an endless loop, each frame sharpening the anger and betrayal I felt. My hands itched to confront Mark, to demand answers, but I knew better. This wasn't the time to scream. This wasn't the time to break. I needed control. I needed strategy. I needed the truth, clear, undeniable, and unguarded. The next morning, Mark moved through the house like nothing had changed. He kissed me on the cheek, asked if I slept well, and laughed softly at a joke I didn't even hear. Every smile, every casual movement, every word was a mask, and I could see the cracks underneath. The man I had trusted, the man I had loved, had spent weeks deceiving me, and now it was time for the truth to come out. I called him into the living room, my voice calm but firm. "Mark, we need to talk." He turned, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "What's wrong?" he asked casually, like the events of Thursday didn't exist. But I didn't answer. I just gestured toward the couch and sat down, keeping my hands folded in my lap, a picture of composure. He hesitated, then joined me. "Are you upset about something?" he asked, trying to read my expression. I kept my gaze steady, almost piercing, and for the first time in months, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I saw you," I said, voice low but unwavering. "Thursday night." He froze. Just for a fraction of a second, his eyes widened, but he quickly masked it. "Saw me, saw what?" he asked, feigning ignorance. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, let the weight of my calmness settle over him. There's something terrifying about a calm person who knows the truth. He shifted, glanced at the floor, and avoided my eyes. "Mark," I said slowly, "don't lie to me. I know what I saw. I know what you did. I know what Jenna did. I watched it all." His face went pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it, searching for words that wouldn't come. The mask cracked, revealing the guilty man behind the smile. It's not what you think," he stammered, trying to reach for my hand. I recoiled slightly, not out of fear, but to remind him that boundaries had changed. "Not what I think," I repeated, voice sharper now. "Mark, I have video. I have screenshots. I have the proof that she was more than just a babysitter to you. Don't insult my intelligence." His jaw tightened. He looked like a cornered animal, and I realized, with a cold clarity, that this confrontation wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about watching the man I had loved unravel before me. It was a mistake," he finally said, voice trembling. "It didn't mean anything." I laughed, low and bitter. "A mistake? A mistake doesn't happen over and over. A mistake doesn't linger in whispers in the hallway, doesn't brush hands where they shouldn't, doesn't linger late into the night. Don't insult me with excuses." He looked at me, panic in his eyes now, and I felt a strange mix of pity and rage. How long had he thought he could hide this? How long had he assumed I would remain blind, trusting him blindly, loving him blindly? "Mark, we've been married for 10 years, I said, voice steady but ice cold. 10 years. I thought we had trust, honesty, respect. And yet you." I gestured toward the hallway where Jenna had lingered the night before. "You betrayed all of it. Not just with her, but with me. With our family." He swallowed hard. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted." I cut him off. Don't. Don't tell me you didn't want to hurt me. Don't tell me you didn't know the consequences of your actions. Don't tell me you didn't weigh every risk before choosing to cross every line. I know you did. And now you'll face it. For the first time, he looked genuinely scared. The arrogance, the charm, the dismissive attitude, all gone. He was just a man who knew he had been caught, and for the first time, I had all the power. I have the recordings, Mark, I said, voice quiet but sharp. Every hug, every whisper, every touch. I know everything that happened. And I'm not just going to forgive this, not easily, not without consequences. You want to explain? Go ahead. But know this. I am done pretending. I am done trusting blindly. And I will make sure that everyone knows the truth if you don't come clean now. He swallowed again, visibly shaking. It wasn't like that, he said, voice barely above a whisper. It started harmless. I didn't what? I asked, voice rising just enough to pierce the tension. Didn't respect our marriage? Didn't respect me? Didn't respect our home? Tears pricked his eyes. I don't know what came over me. I didn't plan it. I didn't. You didn't plan to betray me? I echoed. Mark, betrayal doesn't need a plan. It just needs intention, and you had it. Every touch, every lingering glance, every Thursday night when you thought no one was watching. That was intention. That was choice. And it's over now. He sat there, silent, defeated, as I let the weight of my words settle in the room. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just let him sit with it. Let him feel the full weight of what he had done. There is a certain power in silence, a certain terror in calmness. And I had discovered it. I want answers, I said finally. I want to know why. I want to know how you could do this to me, to us, to our family. Speak now, or accept that your silence is your confession. He ran a hand over his face, shaking his head. I don't know. I don't even know why. She started it. I wasn't thinking. It was a moment, a lapse. I didn't. You didn't what, Mark? I pressed. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I'd stay blind? Did you think our child wouldn't eventually see this behavior too? You made your choice, and now you're trapped in it. Own it. He slumped into the couch, silent, and I felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. Not pleasure, not joy, but a sense of clarity. The betrayal was real. The evidence undeniable. And I had confronted it with precision, with control, with the power that comes from knowing the truth. I trusted you, I said, voice breaking just slightly. I trusted you more than anyone. I loved you, Mark. And you threw it away over a babysitter. A moment that was never a moment at all. Just a series of choices that added up to the ruin of trust. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't move. I didn't comfort him. Comfort was not my job anymore. Justice, exposure, truth, that was what I owed myself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, voice barely audible. I'll do anything to fix this. Please tell me what to do. I looked at him steadily. You think apologies will fix this? You think words will erase weeks of betrayal? You think pretending it never happened will change what I saw, what I documented, what I know? He shook his head, silent. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I need time, I said, standing up, holding my gaze. Time to think, time to decide, time to plan. And you will respect that. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not touch unless asked. And you will live every day knowing that I saw everything. Everything. Mark nodded, defeated, knowing there was no charm, no excuse, no diversion that could undo what had been revealed. I left the room, leaving him there with his guilt, his fear, his shame. I went to the nursery and watched my daughter sleep. She was safe. She was innocent. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of control. I had confronted the betrayal. I had forced the truth into the open. And now the next steps, revenge, exposure, justice, were mine to plan. That confrontation didn't fix anything. It didn't heal the wound. But it did something just as important. It marked the end of pretending, the end of ignorance, the end of allowing betrayal to linger in the shadows. Thursday had led to discovery. Discovery had led to confrontation. And confrontation had ignited a fire I hadn't felt in years. I knew one thing with certainty. Nothing would ever be the same. And for the first time, I welcomed that change. After the confrontation, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. I had confronted Mark. I had made him face the truth. And yet, there was still a gnawing unease inside me, a suspicion I couldn't shake. The hug, the whispers, the lingering touches. They were all terrible, but my gut told me there was more. Something deeper. Something I hadn't yet seen. That night, I returned to the nursery. The baby monitor sat on the dresser, still softly glowing, the tiny green light blinking like a heartbeat. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the play button on my laptop. I had reviewed the footage from Thursday countless times, but now I needed to go further. I needed to examine everything frame by frame, every angle, every movement. I needed the whole truth. I opened the recordings, selecting the files from the hidden cameras. The living room, the hallway, the nursery. Every angle was captured, every second preserved. I started with the hallway footage, the angle I had initially overlooked. My heart raced as I watched Jenna and Mark move from the living room to the hallway. At first, it seemed like the same sequence I had seen before. The soft laughter, the subtle touches, the leaning in. But then, as I slowed the footage, I noticed something I hadn't before. The way Mark guided her hand down the hallway, almost as if he were ensuring privacy. Almost as if he were leading her into a room no one else would see. I paused the recording, my breath catching. I rewound and watched again. Yes, that's exactly what he did. And then my eyes widened. The camera in the hallway had captured a faint shadow slipping into the nursery. I adjusted the brightness and contrast, heart pounding, and there it was, Jenna inside the nursery, standing near my baby's crib. I froze. The images made no sense. Why would she be in the nursery after the baby was asleep? Why would Mark, my husband, allow her in there alone? And then I noticed the subtle movements, the whispers, the soft murmurs that weren't directed at my child but at each other. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about inappropriate intimacy. This was about control. This was about a secret world they had created without me, right under my nose. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, replaying the footage on a larger screen. I slowed it down frame by frame until every detail was visible. Jenna's hand rested on the edge of the crib, but not gently. No, she was leaning forward, watching, studying, almost calculating. And Mark, he wasn't watching her. He was watching me, I realized with a cold clarity. Not directly, of course, but the way he moved, the way he glanced over his shoulder, the subtle tension in his body. It was as if he knew someone was watching, and he was careful to control what that person saw. My stomach twisted. How long had this been going on? How much had I missed because I had trusted too easily, because I had ignored the small signals, because I had convinced myself that Mark, my husband, couldn't possibly betray me this way? And then, the most horrifying moment came. On the monitor, I saw Mark reach into his pocket and pull out something. A small vial, barely noticeable, but unmistakable in its shape and reflection under the nursery light. My blood ran cold. He leaned down near the crib and placed it on the changing table. I froze. My mind raced. A vial? What could it be doing in the nursery? Was it medication for the baby? Something for Jenna? I didn't know, and the uncertainty made my chest tighten painfully. I zoomed in on the footage, straining to see any labels, any markings. It was impossible to tell, but the placement was deliberate. It wasn't casual. And then the unthinkable. Jenna leaned down and whispered something into the vial, her lips barely moving, her voice just a breath. And Mark nodded, almost reverently. I leaned back in my chair, unable to believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just an affair. This was something else entirely. Something secretive. Something dangerous. My hands were clammy, my heart racing, and yet my mind was sharp, calculating. I had proof. I had recordings. I had undeniable evidence of their betrayal, of the layers beneath the initial deceit. I replayed the footage, eyes scanning every frame. Mark and Jenna moved carefully, deliberately, covering their tracks. But no matter what they did, they couldn't hide from the cameras I had installed. Every glance, every whispered word, every subtle gesture was captured, preserved, unalterable. And then a realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. They weren't just betraying me emotionally. They were trying to manipulate something else. My baby. My daughter. The thought made my hands tremble violently. I had trusted them both, allowed them into our home, allowed them into our lives. And now I saw clearly the danger I had unknowingly invited. I needed to act. But not yet. I needed more evidence, more clarity, before I made any moves. I had confronted Mark, yes, but confrontation without full knowledge would leave me vulnerable. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal. Over the next few days, I reviewed every recording, every angle, every tiny movement. I annotated the footage, making notes, taking screenshots, cataloging every interaction. The pattern was undeniable. Thursdays weren't just about casual visits or innocent hugs. They were carefully orchestrated encounters, designed to be hidden from me, hidden from the world, hidden in the shadows of our home. And then, the moment that changed everything. On the monitor, I caught Jenna placing a small envelope under the crib mattress. My stomach dropped. I froze the frame, zoomed in, and held my breath. There was writing on it, a name. My name. My handwriting from months ago, copied perfectly. I felt bile rise in my throat. They were involving me directly. They were planning something, and my instinct screamed that it wasn't harmless. I had to know what was in that envelope, but I couldn't touch it yet. If I interfered now, they would notice, and I needed them to remain unaware that I had discovered their secret. So I watched. I waited. And as the night wore on, I realized that the betrayal went far beyond a hug, far beyond inappropriate intimacy. This was a calculated, deliberate plan, a betrayal layered with deceit, manipulation, and a hidden agenda that involved our child. My heart raced as I considered my options. I could confront them immediately, but that risked alerting them. I could gather more evidence, but that would take time. And I had no idea how far their betrayal went, how deep the danger was, or what their ultimate goal might be. I leaned back in my chair, my mind working furiously. The recordings had revealed the truth, but they had also revealed something else: power, knowledge, the ability to act decisively when the time came. I was no longer blind. I had seen everything. And with that knowledge came control, a tool I could wield carefully, methodically, without letting emotion override strategy. That night, I made a decision. I would keep recording. I would keep documenting. I would gather every piece of evidence, every secret, every moment of their deceit. And when the time was right, I would use it, not just to expose them, not just to confront them, but to reclaim the life, the trust, and the safety that they had stolen from me. As I turned off the monitors, my baby sleeping peacefully in her crib, I whispered to myself, I know now. And when I act, nothing will be hidden from me or from anyone else who needs to see the truth. Thursday had started as a day of suspicion. The baby monitor had revealed a hug. The hidden cameras had revealed intimacy. And now, the recordings had revealed the full depth of their betrayal. A betrayal I hadn't yet fully comprehended, but one I was ready to confront, expose, and ultimately, turn into my advantage. This was no longer just about Mark. No longer just about Jenna. This was about me, about my daughter, about reclaiming control over a home that had been infiltrated by deceit. And I knew with cold certainty that the next steps I took would change everything. Thursday had revealed the betrayal. The confrontation had forced the truth into the open. And now the recordings had shown me the depth of the deception. A depth I was ready to exploit. A depth I was ready to turn into my advantage. Thursday had changed everything. Discovery had revealed the betrayal. The confrontation had exposed the cracks. And the recordings had shown me the full depth of their deceit. But knowing was not enough. I couldn't just sit and simmer in anger, waiting for karma to act. No, I needed action. I needed control. I needed revenge. Not petty, not impulsive, but precise, calculated, and undeniable. I spent the next several days planning. Every move was deliberate. Every detail mattered. I reviewed the recordings again and again, cataloging every moment of intimacy, every secret whisper, every instance where Mark and Jenna had tried to manipulate the truth. I took screenshots, extracted audio, backed up every file in multiple locations. The evidence was bulletproof. But revenge isn't just about evidence. It's about timing, presentation, and inevitability. I needed them to know that their actions would have consequences, that every deceitful step they had taken was visible, undeniable, and inescapable. First, I set the stage. I went about my normal routines, calm and composed, careful to mask any hint of suspicion. I greeted Mark in the mornings with a neutral smile, laughed politely at his casual jokes, and never mentioned the recordings. Jenna visited, as always, acting friendly, oblivious to the storm building beneath the surface. Every moment they thought I was unaware strengthened my advantage. Next, I created a plan to involve others. People who could witness the truth, who could act as allies in my strategy. I contacted a trusted friend, someone who had always suspected Mark's wandering behavior, but lacked proof. I showed her selected clips from the recordings, carefully chosen to convey the seriousness of the betrayal without revealing the full extent yet. Her reaction, shock, disbelief, and then a quiet determination, confirmed that I had chosen the right person. But I wasn't done. This had to be bigger. Mark and Jenna needed to feel the weight of exposure, the inevitability of consequence. I devised a multi-step approach: confrontation, evidence revelation, and public accountability. Each step was designed to maximize impact, leaving them no room for excuses, no opportunity to hide. The first step came one evening. I invited Mark to the living room, casual but firm. "We need to finalize things," I said, sitting across from him, laptop in hand. His eyes narrowed, sensing the change in tone, the undercurrent of authority I had cultivated. "What things?" he asked cautiously, as if testing my mood. "The truth, Mark," I said calmly. "Everything you've done. Everything you've tried to hide. It ends tonight." I played a short clip from the recordings, just long enough to show a hug, a whisper, a subtle touch. His face paled, eyes widening in disbelief. You didn't," he stammered, but I held up a hand. "I did," I said. "And there's more. Much more." Next, I revealed the screenshots, the audio clips, the evidence of the vial, the envelope under the crib mattress. Mark's lips parted, but no words came. He was trapped in the undeniable proof of his betrayal, and I watched him shrink under the weight of it. Jenna arrived shortly after, unsuspecting, carrying her usual bag of toys and snacks. She stepped into the living room and froze as I motioned toward the laptop. The footage played again, this time showing her movements near the crib, the whispers, the hidden exchanges. Her face went pale, lips trembling. "This," I said, voice firm, cutting through the tension, "is what you've been doing while I trusted you both. Every Thursday. Every whispered word. Every touch. It ends now." Jenna stammered. It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like." I echoed, my voice sharp. "You think the recordings lie? You think my cameras are exaggerating? No. This is reality. And reality is that you have betrayed me, my trust, and our home." Mark and Jenna tried to speak at once, their voices overlapping, excuses spilling out, but I silenced them with a raised hand. "No. I will not listen to lies. I will not tolerate excuses. You chose this path. You chose betrayal. And now, you will face the consequences." Then came the final step: public accountability. I had contacted Mark's boss, carefully presenting the evidence of his deceit, framed as a warning about professionalism and character. I had also prepared to involve Jenna's references, her work contacts, anyone who could be affected by their behavior. The goal wasn't just personal revenge. It was to ensure that their deceit had consequences in every aspect of their lives. I sent the evidence in carefully constructed emails, each accompanied by a brief explanation. Attached is proof of behavior that affects trust, professionalism, and responsibility. Please review and take appropriate action. I knew the impact would be immediate. People like Mark and Jenna relied on appearances, on charm, on deception to navigate their world. Now that world was collapsing. Back at home, I kept the recordings playing silently on a second monitor, a reminder to both of them of the truth I held. The tension was palpable. They sat defeated, knowing that nothing could erase what had been revealed. I watched them, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and relief. Satisfaction that justice was unfolding, relief that my daughter's safety was secure, and a strange sense of empowerment that came from taking control of a situation that had once seemed hopeless. But the twist, the final, satisfying turn, was mine alone to deliver. I had prepared one last reveal, a demonstration of my mastery over the situation. I gathered Mark and Jenna in the living room, asked them to sit, and then played a compiled video. The entire timeline, Thursday after Thursday, every deceitful gesture captured and annotated. Their faces went from shock to horror as they saw the full scale of their actions, the depth of betrayal, the careful documentation of every move. "This," I said, voice calm but deadly, "is the reality you tried to hide. And now it's impossible to deny, impossible to erase. You have been exposed not just to me, but to anyone you thought you could deceive." Mark tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "No words. You don't get to explain. You don't get to manipulate. You only get to witness the truth. And the truth is that you have failed in every way that matters." Jenna's shoulders slumped. I didn't. "No," I said, cutting her off. You did. And now you will face the consequences. Everything you built on deceit is gone. Your plans, your lies, your control, they end here. I am taking back everything you tried to steal from me. The final twist came not in words, but in action. I had arranged for a professional cleanup, both digital and physical, to ensure that any further attempts at deceit would be impossible. The hidden cameras remained, silently recording, a reminder that I had the upper hand. I had reclaimed control of my home, my trust, my life. And the knowledge of betrayal? That belonged to me alone, weaponized in a way that guaranteed they would never attempt deception again. By the end of the night, Mark and Jenna were broken, stripped of their confidence, their lies laid bare. I watched as they left the house, the weight of their actions pressing down on them, and I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not glee, not vengeance for its own sake, but the calm, steady satisfaction of someone who had taken control, faced betrayal, and executed justice with precision. I held my daughter close that night, rocking her gently as she slept, and whispered, "Everything is safe now. I will always protect you." And I meant it. Thursday had begun as a day of suspicion. The baby monitor had revealed a hug. Hidden cameras had revealed intimacy. Recordings had revealed the depth of betrayal. And now, through careful planning and execution, revenge had restored balance. The house was quiet, the storm had passed, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Nothing would ever be the same again. But for the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt safe, in control, and truly free. Betrayal had been met with strategy. Deceit had been met with foresight. And betrayal's architects had faced consequences that were not only inevitable, but perfectly deserved. And in that moment, I realized something deeper. I had not just exposed them. I had exposed my own strength, my own resilience, my own capacity to rise above betrayal and turn it into power. The revenge plan was complete. Justice had been served, and the truth finally belonged to me.